Never looked Faye in the eye again, although they did have some good news for me. Faye had not sleepwalked or sleep-talked or done anything out of the ordinary in over 24 hours. This corresponds almost exactly for when I retrieved the ring from the Dreamcatcher. After an hour or so of reprimanding me for being a thick-headed idiot, Faye forgave me. We laid in bed together and talked about everything. I apologized to her for the way I was treating her. I put the ring on her finger and she looked relieved to have it back on. I swore I'd never screw up like that again. We both slept a full night, no strange night terrors or bad dreams or sleep disturbances of any kind. And in the morning, yesterday morning, we had Faye's favorite, waffles. At around 11 a.m., I received a call to my great relief. It was Nathan. I immediately pressed him for information about T-Way and what exactly had happened after they had left the cabin that day. He ignored my question and said very ominously, "Please let me speak to the one who followed you home." He said something like, "What?" To which he replied, "The one that calls itself Faye." My wife and I had been sitting on the couch watching the most recent Game of Thrones, so I sort of handed the phone off to her and said, "It's for you." She put the phone to her ear, said hello, and then listened for about a minute. I could hear Nathan speaking, but I couldn't make out what he was saying. Suddenly, a volcano of black puke exploded from Faye's mouth. It absolutely covered the couch and carpet and sent me nearly jumping out of my skin in the process. Faye doubled over onto the floor like a rag doll, coughing and sputtering. I fell to my knees beside her, panicked, asking if she was all right. I picked up the phone and screamed at Nathan, demanding to know what he had said to her. Nathan just said, "Please, Felix, please, listen," and then proceeded to recite some sort of chant or incantation. A wave of syrupy vomit rushed up my throat and out of my mouth, and as with Faye, it was oily and black. I'm actually an emetophobe, so vomiting sends me into a state of near catatonia, but Faye had made a quick recovery and was right there to nurse me back to my senses. Nathan spoke to me a bit more and explained what he had done. I'll get to that in a bit. Faye and I spent the rest of the day feeling queasy, and eventually went to urgent care across the road to get checked out. They gave us blood tests and checked our vitals and sent us home, telling us that we suffered minor food poisoning, but I know deep down it wasn't the damn waffles. Thankfully, for the past several hours, we've been feeling much better. I mentioned a while back that T-Way and Nathan had a disagreement over who was the real Faye, and whether it was possible for a duplicate of my fiancée to exist. When I hiked back down the mountain from the cabin a few days ago, they had to go up into the forest to avoid the snow collapse all over the road. Out there in the woods, they had the crying of a woman and followed it to an abandoned mine. Both of them knew it was very likely a trick, but T-Way said that it was their duty to explore the possibility that Faye was alive somewhere on the mountain. The blizzard came on earlier than they expected. They stood at the mouth of the mine listening to the begging of a young woman somewhere off in the dark, but concluded that its voice was too unusual to be a human. T-Way and Nathan decided to bless the entrance of the mine to ward off its dark inhabitants. But their chanting enraged whatever lived in it. It came out of the tunnels and snatched T-Way. He screamed all the way down into the dark, and Nathan could not follow. He ran away, terrified. It got lost in the blizzard. He wandered for an hour, fearing death, and eventually came upon a skinned body swinging from a low tree branch. It was so fresh, the blood hadn't yet frozen. Nathan knew it was his father's corpse. Eventually, he found his way back. He said his father's voice guided him out of the squall. Nathan explained to me that the imposter's goal of taking over someone's mind was different from its goal of killing people. These creatures hunt and kill at random, salvaging the human parts they need to walk the earth as mortals for a short time. But their real pleasure derives from conquering a person from within. Faye was one of the unlucky few that are chosen in this way, and the imposter's fixation on her had lasted for decades. After long enough, their continued presence in the body and mind of the victim leaves a stain on the soul. this corruption necessitates a purge, hence the barf party that we held in the living room, whose stains, by the way, I have thus failed to banish. Nathan invited me to the funeral ceremony for T-Way.
By the power of the
I'm already on
Illuminati!
the verge of losing my job and flat broke from this experience, but I promise that I'll honor his memory in my own way. I can't go back to it.
Reinhund, die!
Fortunately, Nathan was more than understanding and promised that we'd meet again. I'm still thinking about all this. I do not yet have all the pieces of the puzzle. If you're looking for all the answers, you're going to have to help me find them. But I think I have part of this figured out. The imposter gave Faye's ring back to me. They wanted me to destroy the Dreamcatcher. The ring was an object of great sentimental value both to Faye and to our relationship. The creature used it to invade Faye's mind and control her thoughts. Its goal was to convince her that it was me, so that she would welcome it into our home late at night. The home, Nathan said, symbolically represents the body, just as the ring represents our union. To be welcomed into the home is to be granted access to Faye. But because the imposter could not learn everything it needed from Faye to mimic me, it gave up on that project and instead came after me. It returned the ring to me, thus giving me its power over Faye, but it broke the Dreamcatcher to retrieve it. It turns out that creepy, mysterious Dreamcatcher was, in fact, protecting the cabin and everyone inside, which is why the imposter needed to be invited in. When I broke it, that creature could easily come in and kill me, but it needed information from me before it did. It needed to know one of Faye's darkest secrets to rule her. I'm not sure I'll ever unravel the mystery of the number 5. But I do know one thing. Not knowing what it means actually saved Faye's life. I'm not sure I ever want to know. As for Faye, she's back to normal and in perfect health. She sleeps soundly and only mumbles a bit, which is pretty normal for her. Her sick sense of humor is found as well. Last night, she went to sleep. She turned out the light and said to me, "Thank you for trying so much." And then she leaned over and licked.
More medicine for the patients!
Last month, my fiancée Faye and I went to her parents' cabin up in Pike Creek, Colorado. We had a set of extremely weird and terrifying experiences. We found an old Dreamcatcher on a tree in the woods out back, and at night, we heard a series of unsettling voices. Calling out from the forest. At first we thought someone was messing with us, but then the voices began to take on recognizable traits. We heard Faye's grandfather calling out for help. He's been dead since 2012. And her mother last year. She lives 700 miles away. Faye got sick and began talking in her sleep, and at one point, the voice of a woman outside began to repeat some of the things Faye was mumbling, as though they were communicating. I documented this entire experience and received overwhelming support from many of you. Thousands of people have gotten involved with helping us out. Everything has been going really great. Up until a few days ago. I'm sorry I haven't posted about this matter in a while, but Faye and I have been trying to forget, especially with her weird sleep disorder. The best course of action for us was to try to bury what had happened and move on with our lives. The more upset or stressed out she becomes, the more she sleepwalks and sleep talks. And that is when scary things happen. For those of you who haven't heard the prior stories, my fiancée has suffered from extensive sleep disturbances since she was 5. She has night terrors and is an accomplished sleepwalker. At the request of many of you, I've interviewed her, so you can hear all of her weird experiences. Long story short, some sort of entity became fixated on her while she was at the cabin in Colorado, and made several attempts to coax her into the woods. And those attempts failed. It came after me. It followed us home to California and tried to get into our house late at night by communicating with Faye while she was sleepwalking. We were both exposed to whatever it was, to the point that it made us ill. A family friend, Nathan, essentially forced us to puke our guts out through a spiritual purging process. Although, I wish he'd told us first because we destroyed my living room carpet. We thought it was over. Faye went back to normal and returned to her playful, funny self. She got her strength back. Not just physically, but the strength of her personality returned as well. She's been feisty. Won't put up with any of my shit, which was a great sign that she was feeling better. And she's been wearing her engagement ring. Hasn't left her finger since we got back. But 2 nights ago, weird things started to happen. I absolutely dread writing this because I know that by paying attention to it, I risk exacerbating the situation. The part of the carpet where we lost our lunch is permanently stained and rather dark because I couldn't afford to get a decent carpet cleaner out in time. When we were watching, crying through the new Game of Thrones on Sunday, Faye pointed out that the stain looked like the shape of a man. About 3 foot long and basically looks like some kind of 2-dimensional troll. We made some Rorschach jokes about it and we went to bed. I rolled over in the middle of the night and put my hand on Faye's back. And the second I touched that empty space in bed, 1,000 horrible thoughts rushed through my head. Faye hadn't sleepwalked since things settled down, and I feared this was an omen that our visitor had returned. I found her downstairs. She was sitting in the dark, spine straight, right in front of the TV. It was off. Her eyes were closed. She was running her fingers across the stain on the carpet, whispering to it and giggling. I raced over and threw the lights on, forgoing my rule of never waking her up abruptly from a bout of sleepwalking. I just didn't want this to be happening again. I couldn't accept it. And just before I shook her awake, she said, "How could I forget?" She came to. I had no idea where she was. She seemed unusually upset that I had woken her up, as if she were in the middle of a very good dream, but then appeared frightened when I told her what was happening. I asked if she remembered anything. She said no. I can't tell if she lied to me. On our way up the stairs, she inexplicably vomited all over the wall. It was the same dark brown black color as when Nathan had poisoned her. At this point, I was completely freaked out. I tried to keep my cool and helped Faye into bed. Got her some water, made sure that she was all right. She was absolutely fine. Couldn't explain why she puked. Then I shut off the light, closed the bedroom door, spent about half an hour trying to clean the goddamn wall off. I've mentioned in my previous posts that I'm in the middle of it. So cleaning vomit is basically the worst form of punishment I can imagine, but something distracted me from the horrid stench. No matter how hard I scrubbed, the stain would not come out, and it had splattered roughly in the shape of a man. Because of the fact that Faye was standing halfway up the stairs and barfed down the wall, this time the stain was much larger than the one on the carpet. Almost 6 feet tall. When I finally got in bed, Faye was still awake. And was kind enough to give me a really nice shoulder rub as I lay there in a heap. I was nauseated, terrified. She tried to reassure me, but we both knew what was happening. Whatever it is that's fascinated with her, it's It's back. Or it never left. I don't know how long we sat there talking, but eventually I passed out. Faye lying in my arms. She said a few more things in her sleep, but I could never quite catch them. I was just too tired. The next day I tried to reach out to Nathan, but he wasn't answering his phone. I had to work, so I didn't see Faye all day. I got home before she did. So I spent several hours jumping at every sound outside while I graded my students' final papers. When she did get home, she said she'd felt sick all day and just wanted to go to sleep. So she went upstairs and showered and got into bed. Around 10:30 p.m., I shut off my laptop and headed upstairs. Faye was sitting on the bed, feet on the ground, staring out the open window into the woods across the street. I gently laid her down, rubbed her back until she snored. The only way to guarantee that she won't get up for a long time. I inspected the whole house. I don't know if I'm just freaking myself out or if I'm tired, but the vomit stains seem bigger now than they were before. I'm calling a guy tomorrow to come and do a professional cleaning, and I'm pissed because I know I'm going to get stuck with a $200 bill for the job. I checked the backyard and didn't see anything, then made sure that the front door was locked and all the windows were sealed tight. The last window I checked was the one in the guest room, the one in which Faye had hand-drawn the number 5 backwards while sleepwalking. I stood there for a long time. It was late and dark, and all the memories of last month's events just kept cycling through my mind over and over. I felt dizzy and sleepy, almost hypnotized. It was a strange feeling of ineffable mixture of strange relaxation and terror. I can't explain to you why I did this. Not even thinking about it, I reached out my hand and lazily drew a backwards 5 on the window. And in that tiny little moment, I saw something move behind the trees across the street. Faye abruptly burst into sleep laughter from down the hall as I walked back to the bedroom. In the dark, I could hear her giggling the entire way. And nothing else to report for now. It's 10:30 p.m. on a Tuesday as I write this. I'm gonna go to sleep. And I will update if there's any new developments. I pray there aren't any. Now, a lot of you have mentioned that since I retrieved Faye's ring from that creepy dream catcher, it's possible that it's been cursed. After all, the ring was given back to me. It could have been causing the new disturbances around the house. So Faye and I have decided to take that long trek back to Pikes Peak from whence the evil ring came and destroy it by throwing it into that mine at the top of the mountain. We've gathered a few fellowship of 7 other people to help us on this journey. I'm kidding. But seriously, a lot of people have speculated that the ring is now the problem. Taking this into consideration, but Faye is not willing to part with it right now. And how she just got it back. And if the entity seeking Faye did curse the ring and got me to break the dreamcatcher to retrieve it, it is even more clever than I could have anticipated. More on this if I decide to make a move. We had a professional carpet cleaning service come out yesterday and try to tackle that puke stain situation. The guy told me over and over, that's not vomit. I can get vomit out. Took him a long time, but he finally managed to get most of the stain off the carpet in the living room and recommended that we get checked out at the hospital. I told him that we already had. Some parts of the carpet were still spotted and ruined. He gave me a discount. The wall in the stairwell is another story. The guy took one look at it and said we need to paint it. But I insisted that the stain had to be removed before doing so. He told me to strip and sand the wall, or he could come back and do it on his day off for a small fee. I told him I'd take care of it. He made an exorcism joke and left. I was amused. Faye came home very excited yesterday. She got a promotion at her job. We celebrated by going out to dinner at our favorite steakhouse, and she ordered her normal meal, thank God. I had a few drinks. I don't drink at all, so I was the DD for the evening. When we got home, we pretty much went right to bed, and on the way up the stairs, she drunkenly said, "Fuck that guy," and pointed a lazy hand at the stain on the wall. That night, I had a very strange dream. I dreamed that I was trying to scrub the stain off the wall, just like I had a few days ago. But this time, I was scrubbing in the dark. Moonlight was just barely seeping through the window and illuminating the outline of the stain, which looked more like a man than ever had before. I loomed over it as I crouched there on the stairs, but then something weird happened. The wall underneath the stain turned mushy like oatmeal. gave way to my hand. My arm went right through the drywall. I tried to pull it out. There was a faint light coming from the hole. I pushed more and more on the squishy wall. It crumbled and plopped onto the floor on the other side, and at last I cleared away a hole big enough to squeeze through. It led into a familiar place. I realized where I was the second I stepped in. It was freezing cold. Even in the dream,
Fetch me their soul.
I was in the cellar of the cabin where
I
I'd
hear
found
the
all those
mournful
jars
cry
in
of
my
the
hair,
wolves.
where I'd found the pieces needed to make more dream catchers. I felt instantly afraid. I turned around to go back into my house, but the wall was sealed shut. The only way out of the cellar was through the open panels at the top of that wooden staircase leading to the outside. Snow was falling down into the cellar. I remember seeing something on the ground behind one of those shelves. I picked it up and instantly recognized its importance. It made me feel like I understood everything better. But before I could see what it was, I was woken up by Faye. We were still in bed. She was sitting up against the pillows, running her fingers across my neck and back. She looked down at me, smiling, but her hair was dangling in such a way that it obscured her face a little. And the moon lit her up from the window behind her, so she looked different. I recognized my fiance's hair and body, but her face looked old and weathered, like an old man's. At that point, I noticed her hand felt different too. It was rough and heavy, like a guy's. It took me a second to realize that she was probably asleep, so I sat still and just watched. After a few moments of this, she abruptly got out of bed and walked to the door, mumbling to herself about sound again. I followed her quietly, wondering what she'd do. She walked through the hall, never searching for the light switch, then stood at the top of the stairs. She started whisper arguing with something down there in the dark. Like when a couple is bickering in public, they're trying to hide it. She said, "You need to leave. You need to get the fuck out of here and never come back. I don't know any of them. I don't know anybody. Is that you? Who's with you? Who's making all that noise? Just gonna stand down there and call my name on me?
Dare to port me, minion.
Why don't you come up here then? Think I don't know what you're doing?"
Thank you, Dark One.
The last thing she said. "We don't know! Leave us alone!" She shouted it so loud that it took me off guard and momentarily paralyzed me with fear. I rushed over and grabbed her before she could fall down the stairs. She told me to get off of her and that she didn't need help, and then she brushed past me towards the bedroom. Along the way, she vomited. I got to spend another hour trying to clean that up while she slept soundly, and guess what? New stain. It wasn't until writing this that I realized. The stain has been making its way closer and closer to the bedroom. This morning before work, I talked to Faye about what happened. She had no recollection of any of it, including barfing up her expensive dinner. But she did say that she heard several voices outside the house early this morning. She said there was a child calling out. "Where is she? Where is she?" And a man grumbling angrily. But she couldn't make out his words. She also said that I was talking in my sleep this morning, which is something I almost never do. Faye agreed to seeing the doctor again because of the vomiting, and mentioned to me, after reading some of the comments, that hypnotism might be a good thing to try. So we're looking for one around town. More on that if anything develops. Also, her older sister Becca is going to come to town in a few days to visit us and see how things are going. Becca lives in Arizona with her husband, an infant son, so I've only ever actually met her a handful of times. It'll be nice having some extra people in the house for once. In other news, Nathan is still not returning my calls, so I might try the Ranger tonight. I want you all to know that it's finals week, both for me as a graduate student and for the undergraduate students that I teach. I might not be able to update every day like I usually do. If I'm missing for a day or two extra, don't be alarmed. Keeping a close watch on Faye. I have one last thing to report. Today at lunch, I put my head down in my office and drifted off for a few minutes. This is also unusual for me because I'm a chronic insomniac and don't take naps almost ever. But I had another dream. T-Way came to me. For those of you who don't know, T-Way was a Native American man who lived near Pikes Peak. He and his son, Nathan, plus our cabin, and helped Faye and me in our struggle last month. She died in the woods, under mysterious circumstances, during my last night at the cabin. In the dream, I was looking out of our bedroom window. And T-Way was standing at the tree line across the street.
Voices are
And it was
getting
really him,
louder.
not the creature that did a horrifying impersonation of him. He was pointing into the forest. I think I'm supposed to go in there. But I don't know whether I can trust my own dreams anymore. And that's where the imposter hides.
Help, zombies! Thank you, Illuminati!
Then he got back to me the next day and asked me to call him. I explained the situation to him. He informed me that he and Jennifer had moved to Washington State years ago, but she started abusing prescription medication a year into their marriage. Over the course of a few weeks, she repeatedly told William that she heard her daughter, who died in childhood, calling to her from the forest outside their home. And one night when William got home from work, the back door was open, and Jennifer was gone. She left with her shoes and jacket. Jennifer
Dismemberment! Such fun! I'm so happy! Thank you! Yeah, happy times! I am soaked in their blood! Joy!
went missing. For almost 6 months, a group of campers found her remains about 40 miles away. She had been buried in the ground with her legs sticking out, and they had been gnawed clean by you.
Dismemberment! Such fun!
That night, I woke up to the sound of a baby crying. Faye was gone. My first thought was that it was coming from her because a few weeks ago she was actively mimicking the sound of a child's cries and walking around the house at night. But this time it was Caleb. I walked down the hall that led to the guest room and found the door open. Becca wasn't there and the crib was empty. I followed the sounds down the stairs, walking past the barf stain on the wall. I'm gonna strip it today. I saw Faye and Becca sitting on the couch. Faye was cradling Caleb in her arms, staring at him. And Becca was babbling on and on about her husband. She didn't notice that Faye was actually asleep. When Faye looked up at me, only the whites of her eyes showed. They were rolled back into her head. She was completely out of it. And she smiled. I stood there for a second, just really disturbed at the scene and didn't say anything. Suddenly something moved just outside the sliding glass door behind me. The door that leads to that tiny little garden. It was almost pitch black out there, but the black shape of a man, a huge man, moved away from the glass and vanished into the darkness. Someone had been standing there behind Faye and Becca, watching them play with Caleb. I took off out the front door, hoping to circle around and intercept the man. We live in a housing complex. there was a walkway that goes behind all the houses, and the only thing separating it from each backyard is a tiny little wooden gate that you can literally step over. Mostly just to keep dogs and rodents out. But I ran up and down that path and found nothing. Nothing at all. There was, however, an oily black substance on the ground about 10 yards away from our back patio. And last night, Faye started mumbling more lullabies in her sleep. Guessing it's probably because she's been thinking about Becca and Caleb's visit. She loves kids so much.
Oh, please! Oh, pain needed!
She also said he's in the stains and gets up and walks around in the dark. I took the advice of a few of you and asked her, Faye, what did you forget? She paused for a long time and replied, he needs me. So when she said it, a child laughed somewhere outside. Tomorrow, the Shoshin woman who visited us last month is going to come back with her friends who specializes in hypnosis. I'll report the results when I can. Again, please forgive me if it takes me a bit longer. This week is a nightmare. The last time I updated, Faye's older sister Becca came to visit us with her infant son Caleb. The presence of the child seemed to have awakened something in Faye, because her sleep disturbances have become more erratic, and her unusual behavior has intensified. They stayed for almost a week, but left abruptly after a few weird experiences with Faye. Becca seemed to be growing angry with Faye over the course of a few days, although I could never really discern why. One night when Faye was asleep, Becca and I sat on the couch and talked more about what had happened. I asked her why she seemed so hostile towards her sister that day. She wouldn't even speak to her, and Becca replied that Faye really has a problem letting things go. If she's mad at someone, she's mad for weeks. If she's hurt for years. She can't forgive. She can't forget. I asked, did you do something to make her mad? Are you two fighting? Becca denied that they were having any sort of conflict and said that she was just speaking in general terms, having grown up with Faye. I asked if there was something in the past that made Faye angry, and Becca sharply responded, nobody did anything to Faye. Nothing happened to her. At that point, she stood up and went upstairs, claiming that she needed to check on Caleb and close the door without saying goodnight. Faye's sometimes difficult to handle because she's proud and stubborn and the strongest person I've ever met, but her sister is like an obsidian wall. You can't get any information out of her. You can't read her poker face. You can't know what she's really thinking ever. But I think that she knows something. Maybe I can't get it out of her, but I figured I'd be able to get it out of her mom. Becca and Faye's mom, Laura, agreed to Skype chat with me this week. This time I'm going to her throat. I successfully removed all the vomit stains from the house, so Faye isn't talking to them in the dark anymore, but she is still getting worse. I feel like she's slipping away. Seeing Faye hold Caleb on the couch with her eyes rolled back in her head and smiling is one of the most disturbing memories I've ever had of this entire ordeal. There's something about Faye and that child that deeply unsettles me. I've been keeping quiet and trying to make sure that Caleb is safe. I have no reason to believe Faye would hurt anyone. Except for one time in college when she punched out a drunk girl at a party for grabbing my ass and saying I'd hit that. As far as animals and kids go, Faye is an angel. The night that Becca stormed off to bed, mid-conversation, Faye did something odd. I woke up to her mumbling in the dark, and when I turned on the light, she was standing at the far end of the room, cradling a pillow in her arms and swaying back and forth, half singing a lullaby. The words were unrecognizable, but the melody sounded so distantly familiar. I called out to her and asked, "Sweetie, what are you doing?" She replied in a low, grumbling voice, "I always wanted to touch this."
Do you hear it? Talking to me.
She sounded drugged. I got up and gently ushered her back to bed and took the pillow away. And I did, she said, and assured her that I do want to start a family with her. She'd be a great mom. And she mumbled, "He's a little kid." I asked, "What do you mean?" She never replied. She just started that rhythmic breathing that lets you know the partner is fast asleep. Angela visited our house the next morning, just after the sun went down. For those of you who don't recall, Angela belongs to a Shoshone tribe in California, and is the daughter of a very important tribal elder. She first visited me and Faye when we got back to California and told us that a malevolent spirit called the Hollow One was infatuated with my fiancé. She said that there was a dark cloud over Faye that could not be easily removed. This time Angela brought her friend, who was a hypnotist, and they inspected the house and the yard. We told them about the barf stains, and Faye's claim that he's in the stains. He gets up at night and walks around in the dark. And then, in private, I told them about Baby Caleb's presence and how it's exacerbated Faye's behavior. I also showed them where I found the new dream catcher. Angela said that this entity has many names, and it's known to several different Native American groups. It's older than the skinwalker, and the progenitor of many evil spirits that inhabit different places near the Rocky Mountains and the Southwest. Her friend referred to it as a soul trader that snatches up a person's essence and takes it down into the dark, and enters the remaining body to seek out more victims. I don't know where the dark is, but allegedly, that's where Faye's at. With too much exposure to this thing, both Faye and I have become tainted by it. This is why we're both vomiting dark bile. Same secretly remains of that evil. Angela spoke with Faye for a long time and concluded that she was still Faye, but on her way to something else. She's making a spiritual journey into a place that she thinks is good and safe, but in reality is being coaxed out of this world. Despite what's happened to us, a lot of this whimsical, metaphysical talk is sometimes hard for me to swallow, but the hypnotist session with Faye did a good job to convince me that there's something here. It's out of my house, with us watching us. The hypnotist had Faye lie on the bed. Faye brought chairs from the dining room upstairs to sit with her. She put her hand on Faye's forehead and hummed a chant for a while, and covered Faye's eyes with her palms and asked her a few questions. Doing things like, "What's your name? Who is your fiancé?" All of Faye's answers were normal. Then the hypnotist hummed some more and lifted her hand. Faye's eyes were rolled into the back of her head, which only happens when she's sleepwalking. And how quickly did it get and then the hypnotist asked, "Who are you?" She responded, "I'm Faye." The important part's the conversation went a bit like this. "Faye, can you tell us who is in this house?" Faye raised her arm slowly and pointed each person in the room and said their name. Even though she was not looking at them, she knew where everyone was.
Do you hear it?
And she pointed at the wall and said, The hypnotist asked, "Is there anyone else? What about the man who's been following you?" She shook her head and said, "Right now, he's outside." We all glanced out the window to the tree line where I'd first seen the figure walking back and forth in the middle of the night, mimicking Faye's sleepwalking. This time there was no one there. Angela asked, "What does he say to you? Is he talking to you right now?" Faye replied, "I can't hear him.
I do not like killing
He's
dogs.
facing the other way." The hypnotist asked, "And what are the dream catchers for? Who makes them?"
Very big dogs.
Faye didn't respond.
Good boy.
She smiled a
The
little
pain is
bit.
over.
I butted in and said, "Honey, I found your hair wrapped into a dream catcher outside. Did you do that?" She put her finger to her lips and shushed. Then she put her palm flat against the wall like she was feeling for a corpse.
Yes,
After a few
they are
moments, she said,
refilled.
"He's here." Right when she finished her sentence, Caleb burst into tears. Becca and Angela rushed up to the room to go check on him. The hypnotist and I remained with Faye. The hypnotist finally went for broke and said, "Faye, sweetie, you wrote the number 5 on the window in the other room. You wrote it backwards. Why did you do that? What does it mean? Did you write it for someone outside to see?" In that moment, Faye's eyes rolled forward and her little green irises finally showed. She immediately looked towards the door that led to the hall and said,
See how you pay for touching
He's
the
listening.
doctor.
Come out. The last thing she said was, "Feel it. Feel it." In a deep, guttural voice, it wasn't her own, then the hypnotist pressed her hand against Faye's eyes and spoke a loud command in her native tongue, and I think it was Shoshone, but I'm not actually sure what group she's affiliated with. Faye immediately woke up and seemed very confused about what she was doing, where she was. And then started to cry and reached out for me, and I hurried over to her and held her in my arms. Her body was cold. It was like she was a corpse. She was crying. She said, "He wants to kill you. He wants you dead. I saw you in the
I
tree."
will destroy you all now! Yeah?
Angela and the hypnotist. I haven't given her a name, by the way, because I don't want you to have to memorize a million names. Hurried around the house, blessing it and burning sage, and also recommended that I call in a Catholic priest for Faye's personal comfort since she's Catholic. And they left after a few words of parting, and Becca seemed really angry and scared at this point. She remained in her room for the rest of the night. I got a call about an hour later from Angela, who told me that she had discussed the situation with the hypnotist, and they believe that Faye is in extreme denial about something, perhaps some sort of trauma, and they said that she had repressed it so well that it had co-signed to a place in her subconscious that only years of therapy or hypnosis could unearth. It was in a place in her mind that could not even be accessed by talking to her in her sleep. This is where the number 5 rests, and that is why the entity hasn't found it yet. Despite communicating with Faye in her sleep, virtually every night he's drilling her brain like a miner digging for gold, and the fun didn't even end there. We all went to sleep pretty early that night because of all that drama, but as I've learned on so many other occasions, when the sleep upset usually results in night terrors, some other sleep disturbance per se. At about 2 a.m., she leapt out of bed, jolting me awake in the process, and bombed down the hall like there was a fire. She started bashing her fists against the door to the guest room, but didn't utter a single word. Her eyes were shut. I flicked on the light and stood there in the hall for just a second, scared stiff. But when baby Caleb started crying, I snapped out of it and rushed over. I bear hugged my fiance to try to get her to stop making so much noise, and in return, she tried to bite me. Faye's never been violent towards me in her life, even in her sleep. She's always a very passive sleepwalker. Creepy, but passive. This time, she was trying to rip my throat out. She was trying to draw blood. I fended her off and sort of apprehended her, and then walked her back to the bedroom. She was basically wearing me like a straitjacket. When I carefully put her back in bed, she whispered, "Go on, Becca was understandably furious the next day, but she swallowed her anger and drove Faye down to the Catholic church at the town center. I went to work. Apparently, they finally got one of the priests to agree to visit next week to bless the house. They explained that this wouldn't be enough, so he said that he'd speak with the bishop. That would take a while. That evening, Becca informed me that she changed her flight, but now she intended to leave in 2 days. I begged her to set aside her differences with Faye and try to get through to her. They said Faye needs her big sister right now, but Becca wouldn't budge. She seemed to be holding a monolithic grudge against something neither of them would tell me. I ordered pizza, Faye's favorite, in a lame attempt to lighten the mood around the house, but the two would only have casual-like conversations with each other, and the tension in the house was so thick I could feel it in my stomach. Faye and I retired to our rooms early and watched Game of Thrones in bed. We always recorded on Sundays because it would work, and only watch it during the week. I asked her if she remembered telling me that the imposter wanted me dead, or that I was going to be put up in the tree. She said she didn't recall anything. She didn't recall saying anything. But my skin and hair was missing. Faye fell asleep pretty quick, but I couldn't sleep at all. I remember that Nathan, T-Way's son, had left me a voicemail a few days prior. I'd forgotten to call him back, so I grabbed my phone and went downstairs. The house was quiet. Becca and Caleb were already asleep upstairs. I turned the TV on low to mask my conversation with Nathan. It was midnight in Colorado, but he answered the phone. I asked him how everything was going. I told him everything. Nathan had a lot to say. He apologized for making me and Faye sick, but said that a simple purging process is a very common treatment for many physical and spiritual maladies in his tribe. However, by my description of the barf stain event, it obviously didn't work. We were still under the influence of the imposter. He said if we came back to Colorado, he would bring us to the elders of his community and request that they perform a more serious healing ritual. I told him that would be Faye's call entirely, but I doubt that she'd go for it, or that the imposter would let her. Last month, when I was in the cabin by myself, there was a blizzard that shut down the whole road. The Rangers couldn't come up to check on me. T-Way and Nathan, and the badass gentlemen they were, actually hiked up the mountain for the snow to check up on me. You can hear all about that in the past post, if you haven't, but basically, on their hike back down, they heard Faye's voice calling out to them from inside of one of the abandoned mines on the peak. T-Way went to investigate, and was dragged into the dark by an unseen creature or animal. Nathan eventually found him dead, like the skin of enslaved. The reason I haven't been able to get a hold of Nathan for several days is because he and a group of men from his community went back to Pikes Peak to investigate the circumstances of his father's death and to explore the cabin. They camped for a few nights. They even spent one night in the woods next to the cabin. Nathan heard T-Way's voice, calling out for help over and over, crying and speaking Nathan's name. However, occasionally the voice would cry out in Numa, the language that some Pueblo Indians speak, but their tribe does not. They speak Hopi. Nathan is fairly certain that this is not in fact his father. He also heard children weeping in the forest. One of Nathan's friends left the tents to take a piss. He claimed that he saw a naked child with grayish skin standing a dozen yards off, facing away, looking up at the trees. He looked like a stiff corpse, and was standing high up in the balls of his feet. This sight apparently scared Nathan's friend so bad he took off, grabbed his things, and went to hike back down the mountain, in the dark, in the cold, by himself. Nathan and his friends tried to stop him, but it was too dangerous to go after him. I haven't seen him since. Nathan told me that he had recurring dreams of a child there on the mountain. The child and a Faye. He said to me, "Tell me about the child, Felix." During our conversation, I had been standing in the living room facing the sliding glass door looking out into the backyard. And right when Nathan said, "Tell me about the child," I saw a large shadow move behind the orange tree outside. I told Nathan to hold on a second and went to grab the flashlight from the kitchen. When I got there, I almost collapsed in fright. The front door was wide open. From my front door, I could see the tree line, and across the street, someone was walking behind the trees. I could see them moving slowly between them. I set down the phone and ran upstairs to wake Faye and Becca, but Faye wasn't in bed. I frantically rushed to Becca's room to see if Faye was there with her, but Becca was fast asleep and was really disturbed at my urgency when I woke her up. We turned on the lights and she went to grab Caleb, but he wasn't in the tiny crib that Faye had bought for him. He was gone. Becca turned into the Hulk in about half a second flat. She started shrieking in rage and terror, screaming, "Where is he? Where is my baby?" over and over. We dashed around the house looking for Faye and Caleb, but couldn't find them. And then I realized she had taken him outside. We ran out there barefoot, straight to the trees, and came up behind Faye. My fiancée was standing there in her underwear, looking up into the trees. Her arms were outstretched, holding Caleb up in the air as if
My grandfather told me a story that his dad had told him. As a boy, he lived in a town by the sea. He didn't say where or what manner of town it was, but I always pictured it as a typical country village with quaint houses and cowboys.
Do you hear it? Talking to me. I was told to do that myself. How you pay touching the doctor.
Streets. The locals had a rule that they would impose on themselves visitors, though this was no tourist village, mind you. They didn't get many that stayed past sundown. And newcomers.
Do you hear it?
The rule was, you weren't allowed to talk outside after sunset. To be more specific, no vocalization at all. Not even humming. Most people didn't even venture outside after dark. And every night, people would triple check that every door and every window in the house was closed. If you had a broken window, you would board it up like a damn airlock. If there was any hole in the wall, any opening between your domain and the outside world, it had to be sealed. My great-grandfather didn't question it as a small boy. I guess if you've lived with something since birth, you wouldn't question it. But every kid gets to that age where they start noticing things. I sometimes wonder, though, would he have even learned the truth if that incident with the visitors hadn't happened? Well, one time when my great-grandfather was around 10 years old, some travelers were loitering around longer than usual. If people didn't leave before it started getting late, they would be chased out of town. Sometimes ushered so politely, sometimes outright scared off. But these guys, 5 of them, were young and boisterous, and they didn't like being nagged at. Sunset came, and the local children started throwing rocks at them, blindly defensive of their town's practice. The sheriff eventually told the men that they had to leave. My great-grandfather remembered the hollering. Maybe they had had something to drink. A lot of something. But they wanted to know exactly why they weren't welcome. Do you got a problem with us? Who do you bumpkins think you are? So on and so forth. Eventually, the small police force had to physically drag them to the edge of town. Past my great-grandfather's house at the very end of the cobbled street, where he and his little sister watched from their bedroom window. He heard them yelling something. And in a moment of pure stupidity on his part, his words, not mine, he tried to open the window a crack to hear them better. He had never heard such tones, what with how the town rationed words. Luckily, his mother stopped them and dragged them both away from the window. That night, my great-grandfather kept getting up to peer through the curtains. His sister, mother, father, and his uncle were all asleep by that time. He told my grandfather that a strange excitement, laced with dread, came over him that night. I suppose it's like checking your phone, but with a lot more fear involved. Then, sometime in the early morning, but long before the sun was due, he spotted the 5 men wandering around the street. They were yelling back and forth at each other, perhaps still half drunk or just acting like the hooligans they were. My great-grandfather waited with trepidation, waited for some kind of boogeyman to descend upon them and snatch them away. Little did he know that what every villager dreaded had already happened. They were long gone. Eventually, with a stab of disappointment, my great-grandfather finally slept through the rest of the night. Until a loud pounding woke him in the early morning. His uncle got to the door before he did. There, on the doorstep, was one of the young men from last night. The whites of his eyes bulging in red, his face etched with horror and sweat. His uncle opened the door fully and the rest of the young men were visible, trembling some ways down the street. My great-grandfather didn't realize until later that one of them might have been dead. He remembered the man's head lolling to one side as he laid on the ground, an empty expression plastered across his face. No blood, no scars. He was just pale. One could have assumed he was still intoxicated. He recalled the way the man's arms were tucked against his chest like he had been cold, even though it had been a mild night. That was the day his family inexplicably packed up and left, while the sheriff was busy dealing with a limp figure on the street surrounded by his friends. My great-grandfather's family barely took anything. The 5 family members simply departed in the early hours and went as far as they could. It happened so quickly, my great-grandfather couldn't muster up any protest. But he did keep asking why. It wasn't until they had settled in the next town over, quite a ways away, that the adults finally came clean. They couldn't leave without someone taking their place, they said. And he could tell by the looks on his parents' faces that they were sickened with guilt. But they simply couldn't pass up the chance to escape. Only his uncle remained stony-faced to tell the tale. He didn't coddle him and his sister, and the parents couldn't stop him. He said, again, that nobody could leave the town without someone else taking their place. There always has to be the same amount of people. He cut off my great-aunt's question why, and went on to explain that the 5 men would have to stay there now, and that it was their own fault for not heeding any warnings. Finally, my great-grandfather reached his limit, and he asked loudly why nobody was allowed to talk after sundown. With a look that was flat and cold, his uncle said, "There are things that awaken, things that can steal people's forces. They do it without you noticing. They do it without being seen. You don't even know it's happening until later. It can take an hour, a day, or even a week. They wait to use it." "What happens?" my great-grandfather asked. "They use your voice to trick your loved ones. They can pretend to be them. They can use it to get into your house. There is one for every person in that town. And if someone leaves without finding a replacement, the creatures will follow them to their new place. The creatures spread like spores. They could be anyone. What we did was against the rules.
Do you hear it?
But we had to risk it." My great-grandfather asked, "That man, did they kill him?" "They did worse than kill him," my great-great-uncle responded. My great-grandfather didn't tell anyone where that town was. Sometimes his son doubts that it even existed. But something worried him. There were 5 family members. Brothers, sisters, parents, and uncles. There were 5 men who came to the village. But one of the men might have died that night. People are asking why my great-grandfather's town didn't deliberately lure people in so they could escape. According to his uncle, they could be anyone at any time. I'm guessing they could pretend to be your family member who is escaping alongside you. The townspeople didn't want to risk even one of those things getting out.
Do you hear it? Talking to me? Do not touch me, Schweinhund!
Part 1. I just picked up a babysitting job on the east side of town. I don't want to use anyone's real names for fear of repercussions, so for the sake of this post, we'll call the girl whom I'm supposed to be babysitting Abby. I had my interview yesterday, and immediately afterward, I was offered the job. I didn't even get to meet Abby before she handed me an offer letter.
Do you hear it? Talking to me? Electrocution. Is that a lovely way to die? Wunderwaffe! I have reached you! Only have a few kills left. Do you hear it? Talking to me? Lovely way to die! I was told to do that by them! I was told to do that by them! Fetch me their souls! Yeah! Here they come! Show no fear! What do they feed on?
He insisted that I not read or sign the offer letter there, but instead take it home and consider the contents there. So that's precisely what I did, and precisely while I'm posting this. I've typed the offer letter and posted it below. To whom it may concern, this letter is a response to your query about the babysitting position of Abigail Yates, age 6. If you have received this letter, you have met a series of undisclosed qualifications by the mother of Abigail, Miss Gwendolyn Yates. Signature of acknowledgement of the terms below is vital for employment. Any breach of these terms will result in immediate termination. Abigail is not to be touched, no matter how much she cries. Abigail is to be fed each hour in her bedroom, precisely on the hour, except between 2 and 4 in the morning, during which time Abigail is not to be communicated with or sought after. The employee authorizes and provides Abigail and Gwendolyn access to infant photos of his or herself no older than up to 6 months of age. If no such photographs are available, there will be no need for further employment. Between the hours of 2 and 4 in the morning, Abigail's room is to be locked and the radio is to be played over the speaker system on a loop, so as to not allow any break in sound. In the event of a power outage, both the radio and the speaker system are set up in the power generator. In the event the speaker system goes out or the music stops, leave the house immediately without Abigail. Abigail has an imaginary friend whom she calls Teresa. It is of vital importance that we acknowledge the existence of the friend, but do not try to contact her in any way. If Teresa contacts you, you are welcome to communicate, but Teresa must be the one to initiate communication in any form. Abigail is not to leave her room under any circumstances. In the event of an emergency, leave the house and dial the emergency number listed in the directory you will receive upon search of this document. Do not call 911 under any circumstances. If anyone comes to the door, do not answer it. They are not real. Upon signature and return of this document, you will be provided further instruction. Thank you. Teresa Yates, Gwendolyn Yates. My curiosity got the better of me, and I signed and returned the letter earlier this afternoon. If she accepts, I'll post the directory and further instruction soon. Part 2. I got online last night to check my inbox, and I got a notification that my post was removed from No Sleep. I asked the mods, but they can't figure out what happened and can't seem to be able to bring it back up. I threw up a post on creepypasta and my own self to make sure this gets out, but I'll be honest, I'm getting a little freaked out. Miss Yates said she would be doing a background check, but I didn't think she'd be able to find me on Reddit. This morning I received the response to my signature of acknowledgement to the terms that I delivered on Monday. I hand-delivered the letter in the hopes that I could get the further instruction in person, but nobody seemed to be home, so I left it in the mailbox. I found the letter in my own mailbox this morning, except I don't think anyone mailed it. There's no address or postage on the envelope at all, just my name. I don't remember if I gave them my address or not. I don't think the website I'm on gives out addresses, but I'll have to check. So here's the letter. To whom it may concern, this letter is in response to your acknowledgement of the terms and instructions listed in the offer letter given by Gwendolyn Yates on June 19, 2017. We are pleased to extend an offer for permanent employment in the Yates home beginning Thursday, June 22, 2017. You are expected to arrive at precisely 3:03 p.m. on the afternoon of the 22nd with the below expectations met. If you are unable to meet all expectations listed below, please do not arrive and we will take it as a declination of this invitation. As stated above, you must arrive promptly at 3:03 p.m. If you are not at the doorstep at this time, the door will not be open to you. You must have already eaten and used the restroom, and no food is to be permitted within the home except for the meals of Abigail. If you are unable to avoid use of the restroom, you must use the one located in the basement. If you open the door to the basement, where it is safe for you to proceed down the steps, Teresa will show you the way. If Teresa does not give you express permission to go to the basement, do not go. The infant photo promised by the signature of your previous document must be on your person when you arrive. It may not have any frame, you must leave it on the plate when you deliver the first meal to Abigail. You are permitted to listen to music or watch the television, and are encouraged to increase the volume in the event Abigail begins to make noise. It is imperative that you remember that during the times that you are in the home, there is nobody else there except for yourself, Abigail, and Teresa. If you begin to suspect anyone else is in the home, regardless of circumstance, leave immediately without Abigail. If any of the doors are unlocked, leave immediately without Abigail. It is imperative that you do not fall asleep while in the home. If you begin to feel tired or drowsy at any capacity, leave immediately without Abigail. If you have any questions about the content of this letter, please refrain from voicing them. If you cannot, then please look for employment elsewhere. We look forward to seeing you. Teresa Yates, Gwendolyn Yates. I expected there to be a directory as well, but it was just this letter. I'll make sure to post the directory if it comes. I'm nervous about going now, but I really need the money. I'll bring my phone so I can call someone if I run into trouble, and so I can take pictures of the inside of the house. Part 3. Today's the day. I'm currently posting this from the couch of the Yates home. Miss Yates left about 5 minutes ago, and she said she'd be back in a little while. I don't much like the sound of that, but I was too nervous to ask for more specifics. Now I'll describe the house a little bit to give you all an idea of where I'm at. This house, as I'm sure you've all ventured to imagine by now, is huge, at least by my standards. It's got at least 3 floors, the top floor, the ground floor, and the basement. I have all intention to explore at least the top and the ground floor, but as of right now, I don't think I'll go into the basement. I've seen the movies. Abigail's room is upstairs. It's a narrow staircase, and at the top is a long hallway with doors on either side. The doors are all locked with thick padlocks, except for the one at the end, which Miss Yates told me was Abigail's. The door is a thick steel door. It's got a sliding bar lock on the top and bottom. And that strange insignia that was on the letters is painted on the door. But the part that is freaking me out is the fact that the handle looks like it was broken off. I don't think this door can be opened at all. The door is shut tight, but I can hear Abigail on the other side. She's shuffling around on the floor. It's a weird scraping sound, like sandpaper on carpet. And I can hear her breathing in a combination between a moan and a tuneless hum. I wanted to call into her and introduce myself, but when I opened my mouth, it went dry, and I found that anxiety had gripped my throat. I couldn't talk to her. I left the upstairs as quietly as I came. I just heard a knock at the door. I know that the rules said not to answer it, but I'm at least gonna take a look through the peephole. Nobody was there. I swear I heard someone rapping at the door, but when I looked through the hole, nothing was there. I'm going through the ground floor now. I've got about 15 minutes until I need to feed Abigail, so I'm spreading the next 10 trying to see what I can find. I think I found Miss Yates' room. It wasn't locked, so I went in. It's extremely tidy, to be honest. I wouldn't be surprised if this ended up being a guest room. There's a bathroom connected to it, but the toilet doesn't have any water in it. And the bathtub is brown with hard water stains. In the corner of her room, she has a big vanity table. There are a bunch of papers on it. They look like letters or something. Holy shit. This is a copy of my post from a few days ago, the one that was taken down. There's another one of my post from Tuesday. I think this is Gwendolyn's handwriting. It matches the letters that I got with all the rules. Well, it's time to feed Abigail. The food she has me giving her is this reddish gray mush looking stuff. It reminds me of pig slop. Miss Yates has them all portioned out in plastic containers. Next to the fridge is a big stack of plastic trays, like the ones you eat off of in elementary school. She told me to feed Abigail one portion on a plastic tray every hour. Just like she told me before she left, I slid the tray with the mush under the tiny gap beneath the door. Holy shit, she just started screaming. It's fucking loud. Oh shit, I forgot my picture. I just slid my baby picture under the door and she stopped screaming almost immediately. I can't believe I forgot that. I need to pay better attention instead of trying to write this all down. I've never heard a kid make that kind of sound though. It was an angry scream from the bathroom floor, like a dog's growl, but more high-pitched and human. I can hear her eating now. She's slipping away and sniffing at something. I went back downstairs. I can't stand listening to her any longer. It reminds me of the time I watched the animals at the zoo as they were fed by their handlers. Next hour, I'm just going to feed her and leave. The sounds she makes are unnerving, and being alone in this house isn't helping. I've been trying to watch TV, but I can't get into anything. I don't think I can sit still for very long. I'm all sorts of anxious. Those copies of my post on Gwendolyn's room are really getting in my head. I just heard another knock, but I don't think it came from the door this time. I think it came from one of the locked bedrooms upstairs. I went up there and called out, but nobody called back. There are 3 other rooms, aside from Abigail's, that are all padlocked. I think he came from the closest to the stairs, but I can't see anything when I put my head on the ground and look under the door. Not even light shows through. Doing that gave me an idea. I don't know why I didn't think of it before, but Abigail's door doesn't sit against the floor. There's about an inch or so beneath it, so I can slide the trays in. I'm going to see what I can see under the door. There's a little girl in there for sure. That's about all I can make out, though. There are plastic trays from her hourly feeding littering the back of the room, but I saw her feet. She's wearing pink slippers and a cream-colored nightgown, and she's shuffling back and forth from one side of the room to the other, muttering or humming or whatever it is she's doing. I know what the rules say, but I'm starting to feel bad for her. She's been locked in there for God knows how long, and I don't think there's a bathroom or anything for her. I might want to call somebody after this is all over. Shit. I just heard another knock from that room by the stairs. I didn't notice it before. When I turned around in response to the noise, I noticed an attic entrance at the top of the stairs. I went downstairs and found a flashlight in a drawer in the kitchen. The hatch doesn't have a lock on it, so I think I'm safe to go up. It's all sorts of dusty up here. There are storage boxes covered in dust everywhere up here. I went through one and found it was full of baby pictures. They all seemed to be of infants, but the date range was enormous. There are pictures from the 1920s in here, and all the babies not even a year old. I wonder if my picture is going to be added to them. The thought gives me chills. I just heard a thump on the other side of the hall. I'm pretty sure it came from Abigail's room. I'm going to see if I can get over to her ceiling. Okay, I'm over her room now. It looks like small holes have been punched in the ceiling, like mice or termites have been gnawing away at parts of it. I'm going to see if I can see Abby from here. Oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck. I'm out of the attic, and I'm never going back there. She saw me, I think, or at least she knew I was there. I looked into one of the holes and saw her standing there. She's small and has brown hair that covered her face in oily folds. She was sitting in the corner of the room, holding my baby picture and muttering something. She suddenly stopped muttering and looked up at the ceiling. I have no idea how she could have known I was there, but she did. She looked up just as normally as if I'd called her name. She stood up and sniffed at the air, and as she looked further up and got closer to me, her hair started to fall away from her face. She has no eyes. They're just flat flaps of skin where her eyes should be, but nothing else. Her eyeless gaze held mine, sharing a moment of pure terror. And I know it sounds crazy, but I think she could still see me somehow. I got out of the attic as soon as I could, but I don't think it was soon enough. She began to scream again, and I ran downstairs. It's much louder from the first, and I can feel the vibrations from the noise in my chest. I turned the television on as loud as I could, just like the instructions said. The noise is giving me a headache, but I can't seem to get the screaming to stop. Part 4. Hey guys, sorry, I just woke up and I'm freaking out here. I don't even remember falling asleep. I remember the screaming and wishing it would stop and sitting on the couch trying to get the television to drown out the sound, but that's the last thing. My phone's almost dead, and I thought I hadn't brought my charger. There's no sign of Gwendolyn anywhere. Nothing looks like it's changed since I fell asleep, but things have got to be seriously messed up now. I didn't feed Abigail. A part of me wishes that she was dead, but I know that's not true because just as I wrote that, I heard a thump coming from my bedroom. How long has it been since she ate? I'm so hungry, and I have to use the bathroom so bad. I can hold off on eating for a little while, but I don't know about the bathroom. I don't want to go upstairs, but I'm just as terrified to use the bathroom up here. Not that there is any water in the toilet anyway. I'm going to feed Abigail to get my mind off it and see if I can find the emergency number for Miss Yates to find out where the hell she is. The feeding went fine. I could hear her snarfing down all the food on the tray even more than before, but as I was walking up there, I realized something. I don't think the music played last night. I was out, but I'm pretty sure I would have woken up to music, especially as loud as I was expecting it to be from the letters. Oh shit, the letters. I brought them. They were in my pocket, but they're not there anymore. I don't remember all the rules, but I think I shattered a few. I fell asleep and everything went to hell. Shit, I'm leaving without Abigail. The door won't open. It won't fucking open. It's like it's locked from the outside. I can hear the metal clank on the other side like it's working against a padlock. Someone locked me in. The windows all have steel bars on them. I think I remember seeing them before, but I'm not sure. My brain isn't working straight right now. I'm seeing things. I think I saw someone standing in the kitchen, but nobody was there. Of course there's nobody there. It's just me and Abigail. I forgot about Teresa. She's supposed to show me the way to the bathroom, but how can an imaginary friend show me the way? I think that if I wasn't supposed to go, she would stop me. So I'm going to go, and if I hear or see anything, I'll take that as a hint. I'm in the bathroom now. The door is weird and big, like the door to an industrial freezer. I don't think there's any air vents in here. I'm glad I only have to pee, because if I had to do anything else, I don't think the smell would ever leave. On second thought, maybe that's the idea. I was about to go upstairs when something caught my eye. This house is another level, except there's a gate blocking the way. It's got a lock on it, but the lock is open. I think somebody is down here. I think I heard a whisper, or a voice, or something. It might be my imagination. No, there's definitely somebody down here. I saw something blue like that. I know it's a bad idea, but I need to go down there. I think there's maybe another kid or something, and if that's the case, I need to make sure that he or she is okay. There's nobody down here, but I think someone was down here once, at least. There's a strange collection of objects down here. It reminds me of a pet rat nest. There are hairbrushes and clothes and papers and all sorts of other stuff on the floor. There are things in the wall too, like the papers on the wall are all drawings from the little kid, except I don't think they're Abigail's work. They're done in crayon, and they all have 3 big black splotches where people have been crossed out. I know they're people because they're all labeled Mommy, Abby, me. I think Teresa did this. I'm going back up the stairs. I'm going to the room I heard the knocking in earlier. I think Teresa might be in there. Didn't I say the room was locked before? I don't remember. The lock is hanging open now. I called Teresa's name, but nobody answered. The moaning in Abigail's room got a little louder, I think, but that might just be my imagination. The room is empty. There's nothing at all in this room except for fresh paint and hardwood flooring. I called Teresa's name again, but she still didn't answer. I thought she'd be the one knocking. The door behind me just slammed shut. Nah, the door won't open. The knocking is getting louder. It's coming from everywhere. You can hear it in the ceiling and in the floor and on the door. Abigail just started to scream again. It's getting louder. You can hear something outside in the hallway. It sounds like the shuffling that I heard in Abigail's room earlier, I think, but I can't be sure because the screaming just won't stop. God, I just wet myself. Like a goddamn child. I'm scared. Edit. Sorry for the scare, everyone. I wanted to let everyone know that I made it home safely. Gwendolyn got home and explained everything. I overreacted for sure. Abigail is a normal little girl with an overactive imagination and a rare physical condition. Nothing more. Thank you so very much for letting me keep you posted on my newest job. I love it here.
What a lovely way to die! Do you hear it? Talking to me? Wunderbar! I have missed you! Do you hear it? Talking to me?
I've been doing freelance design work for a few months and enjoy the lazy late mornings and lack of company, as well as just browsing the web to make the day fly a little faster. I browse Reddit and other sites frequently in search of gems to share with my friends, and often find myself browsing those annoying ad-filled slideshow sites that make me click
I was told to do that by them! Help me, friends! I need ammo!
through mediocre images that don't live up to the clickbait labels. Today I was in the process of exactly this when I stumbled upon a photograph that I will never unsee. It was a random rabbit hole of links that led me there, some uninspired repost of a "when you see it you'll shit bricks" image that was almost clever, then some related links on the side of the page which led to other lists and slideshows. I was lazily clicking through in search of some sort of fulfillment to break the monotony. I clicked through a slideshow of unimpressive links featuring clearly photoshopped, scary hidden monsters when a face I recognized popped up on my screen. It was a picture of me as a child. There was no shadow of a doubt in my mind.
Only have a few kills left.
The faded film photo of me in the striped shorts I now remember holding my stuffed frog I'd adored as a child. It was me at around the age of 5 in what looked like a back lawn, but it didn't seem to be my childhood home. It was larger, and the woods lingering on the property in the background looked darker, taller, and a bit unsettling, to be honest. I stared at the photo a bit, trying to wrap my head around how this photo existed, and why was it on an internet slideshow. And then my thoughts shifted to what brought me here in the first place. I scoured the photo a little more carefully and saw the dark form at the edge of the woods. I actually had to bring the image into Photoshop to make out the shape, but as I adjusted the contrast and brightness, it was there, staring at me from the woods edge. People often have a strong opinion of what is terrifying. Large fangs, evil eyebrows, clowns with knives. People try repeatedly to create horror films that truly scare, but leave the audience with jump scares and loud sounds after a quiet build-up. I used to believe I knew what scary might look like, but I now know I was wrong. As I stared into the desperate, twisted face that in the photo, I only then felt the crippling, absolute fear that I now know exists. That wide-open jaw screaming in agony, in dead eyes, in those spread apart teeth on what can't possibly be a human jaw. The hunched form and horrifically warped spine that trailed behind it. I heard a cracking getting louder and realized that it was my mouse hitting the table. I was shaking violently from an uncontrollable shivering that seized my body. I left the computer and tried to fix the launch, but was unable to. Put off my work for the day and tried reverse searching the image on Google with no luck. I looked for a contact email or number on the site, and there was none. I clicked next in the slideshow to get that image off my screen, and my heart stopped. I recognized the next photo. It was my summer camp. Me, bloody meat from an earlier fall in the front row in my muddy shorts and wide grin. Bobby, my new best friend, was next to me giving me rabbit ears on my head with his fingers. And that moon font is there again. When you see it, ... I began to sweat and panic tensed my muscles. I began to search the photo for what hidden nightmare must be and again had no luck. So decided to bring it into Photoshop and adjust the levels. In the dark patch of shadow behind the cabin, I saw that horrific face that caused me to shake uncontrollably. That awful face. That is the only thing that will ever truly scare me in this life. I clicked next. My college dorm upon moving in. I'd taken this photo with a Polaroid camera. The photo was still in a box in my closet. I know this. I just went through it last week. I could see that face outside of the dorm window, leering from the wood's edge. Just a blur, but unmistakable now. My mind was reeling, and I felt I was losing balance, losing a tenuous grasp on sanity. An absolute horror climbed my spine in ripples.
They know no better.
I ran to the closet and ripped open the box, scattering photos on the wooden floor. I saw the photo, the actual photo. That thing was in it. The same place, barely identifiable, but clearly visible. I ran to the bathroom, overcome with nausea, and vomited a painful stream of bile into the sink after a seemingly endless coughing fit. I looked at myself, red eyes bulging with fright and face red and dripping with sweat. I turned on the sink to splash water on my face and tried to wrap my head around how this was possible, around what that horrible thing in the woods was. I was planning my next steps, who to contact and bring into this to help me figure it out, to find the host of this site or what this meant, when I saw it in the mirror, barely visible behind the translucent shower curtain with wider than wide white eyes, in the black shape of its awful mouth. That thing I could never unsee.
Will you hear it? Talking to me. Electrocution. Such a lovely way to die. Wunderwaffe! I need you!
In the midst of the fields, they say, are where the bodies were found. They were nailed to a stick of wood and used as scarecrows, but not before their bones and organs were removed and replaced with straw. Is the story true? Jonas asked. Of course not, my boy, Hitch replied, laughing his way into the kitchen. Hitch was a 60-year-old man who had lived across from the field his
I was told to do that by them! You dare to paw at me, minion! Do you hear it? Talking to me? Wunderbar! I have missed you! Do you hear it? Talking to me? I was told to do that by them! No, I need ammo! Electrocution. Like a lovely way to die! Wunderbar! I have missed you! I was told to do that by them! Electrocution. Like a lovely way to die!
Whole entire life,
Do you hear it?
Jonas was a young 17-year-old male who was hitchhiking along the road that sits outside Hicks's home. Hicks felt bad for the boy, so he allowed him to stay in the spare bedroom of his home in exchange for work around the farm. He'd only been there for 4 days, and everything was well. But there was something about the fields that gave Jonas the creeps. It was the way the crops swayed inconsistently with the wind. It was the smell that would linger around the fields and make its way toward the home. But most of all, it was the stories that Hicks would tell him about the fields. Every night before he'd go to sleep, Jonas would take a peek at the fields. He'd never seen anything other than crows. But one night, he saw something else. It fled across the field and disappeared into the distance. He didn't get a desirable sighting of the thing, and that's what scared him the most. The only thing he saw was a dark shadow. He didn't look away, even after the thing had already disappeared. He kept his eyes gazed out at the fields. He thought about what Hicks had told him. Dying is not exactly what most people are afraid of. It's the fear of the unknown. Nobody knows what comes after death, so they fear dying in every way possible. In this situation, Jonas was fearing the unknown. If he had gotten a more desirable glimpse of the thing, he'd know what it was. It's the fact that something is out there, and he had no idea what it was. That's what scared him the most. The next morning, Hicks and Jonas were both distressed to find some of the crops in the field to be destroyed. Thinking about what he saw the night before, Jonas was convinced he knew what had destroyed the crops. He informed Hicks about what he saw. "It's the damn crows," Hicks said, ignoring what Jonas had told him. "It's always the damn crows." The hours went by, slowly but surely. Jonas was just finishing up work in the barn and heading toward the house when he heard something shuffling through the fields. He was curious, but yet afraid of the unknown. He walked cautiously into the dark fields, the moon being his only source of light. He had a pitchfork in his hands, and he held that pitchfork in a defensive position as he shuffled through the fields. He heard something. He knew it was out there. Even when he was standing completely still, he heard something moving through the fields. He heard it sniffling. He heard it breathing. There was something out there, but he couldn't see it, and that's what scared him the most. Fear of the unknown. As Jonas stood in the center of the fields, he realized he was lost. He smelled something deadly. He shuffled through the fields a bit more, and that's when he found it. Not the thing, not what haunts the fields, but he found a man nailed to a piece of wood as the straw hung out of his gut. His skin was desiccated, and the bottom portion of his legs were removed, just above his knees. He thought he heard him breathing, but no, the man's been dead for over a month. He heard something else. He looked to his right, and that's when he saw it. Not waiting for a second, he took off running. He ran through the fields, not even worrying about the fact that he was lost. All he could think about was what he saw. Despite the fact that he'd seen it, he still did not know what it was. Fear of the unknown. He kept running, shuffling through the fields as horrified as he could be, until he ran into Hicks, who'd gone out to look for him. He followed him back to the house, explaining to Hicks everything that he saw. "He's out there," he yelled. "I've seen him." "You calm the hell down, boy," Hicks yelled. Jonas had become silent, but still shaking from fear. What haunts the field is not a who, it's not a who, it's a what. It's an it. It's a thing. "It killed a man," Jonas said. "It's still out there. We have to call the police." "There ain't nothing no police can do," Hicks said. "We'll be safe, just as long as we stay away from the fields at night." "What does it want?" "It's the damn crows," Hicks replied. "It's always the damn crows." Jonas went to bed that night, unable to sleep, with the haunting images of what he saw earlier that night on his mind. He spent most of that night glancing out of the window, fearing that what haunts the field is still out there. It wasn't until he began dozing off that he saw it again. Its beaming red eyes could be seen from miles away. But it was much closer than that. It was standing near Hicks's tractor, staring into the fearful eyes of Jonas, before it fled into the fields and disappeared. The next day, Jonas still could not get the images of that night off his mind, from the dead man to the beaming red eyes of the thing. He was being haunted by the images. When the night rolled along, Jonas made sure to get inside the house before sundown. He was all alone that night. Hicks had left hours before for a supply run. Just a few hours after sundown, a scream had echoed from the field. It was a woman. Jonas thought about it, and he thought about it hard. He decided that it wasn't right for him to just stand there and listen as the woman screamed for her life. He grabbed his shotgun belonging to his, not even sure how to use it. He ran out of the house and into the fields, screaming out for the woman. She was no longer screaming, hadn't screamed in minutes. He got to the center of the fields, and that's when he saw her. She was nailed to a stick, straw hanging out of her chest. The bottom portion of her legs were removed, and were also filled with straw. He thought that she was breathing, but no, she was dead. And again, it was the thing, with its beaming red eyes, staring back at him. Jonas took off running, able to find the house minutes later. He ran inside and locked every door and every window. It was coming after him, and he knew it. Eventually, everything had become silent. The only thing he could hear was the beating of his own heart. There was a knock at the door, and his heart was getting louder. Another knock, and his heart was getting louder. Then another knock, and his heart was getting louder. He knew that he could have been hit, but he also knew it could have been a thing. His chest was getting tighter as he took a deep breath. The fear was growing more intense as he didn't know who it was outside the door. Fear of the unknown. He walked slowly to the door, dragging his feet as he got closer and closer. He looked through the peephole, but all he could see was bright red. It blinded him for a few seconds, but he knew what it was because he stared into that red a few times before. He ran from the door and drove rapidly. He hid inside his bedroom closet. Everything was quiet for a moment. The only thing he could hear was his own breathing. One door creaked open. The fear got more intense and his chest even tighter. He tried with everything he had not to make even the smallest sound. The sound of footsteps wandered through the home and made its way toward Jonas. They were getting closer, and the closer they got, the louder his heartbeat would sound. His bedroom door creaked open. Whatever, or whoever it was in the room. It's breathing. He could hear its breathing, as it was louder than it had ever been before. The closet door creaked open, and Jonas was certain he was next to be nailed to a stick and displayed as a scarecrow. However, it was Hicks who stood in front of him. "What are you doing, boy?" he yelled, taking the gun from Jonas. "It was here," Jonas said. "It was outside the door." Hicks shook his head as he was sniffling. It sounded so familiar to Jonas. "You got it all wrong, my boy," he said. "You see, I left out a very important detail about what haunts the fields." He got closer as Jonas backed up against the wall. "It doesn't just kill anybody. It picks up hitchhikers, and it takes them to his home, where it tells them stories about the field." His eyes become a bright, beaming red. "Do you know what it does to them next?" "No," Jonas cried. "It cuts them. It stuffs them with straw, and nails them to a stick out in the fields," he said. "Do you know why it does that?" "No," he cried again. "It's the damn crows," he said. "It's always the damn crows.
Wunderwaffe! I missed you! I was told to do this by them! I was told to do this by them! Do you hear it? Talking to me? Wunderwaffe! I have missed you!
My town is one of those backcountry, middle of nowhere places in which word of mouth folklore and wild superstition defines its population. It's the kind of place a visitor might hear ethereal music in the woods or catch a glimpse of an out-of-place animal roaming the empty fields. If your senses are attuned to such things, then you might even notice strange blade carvings into the slopes of prairies, or old ropes tied to the limbs of withered trees.
Do you hear it? Talking to me? Wunderwaffe! I have missed you! I was told to do that by them! I need more! Do you hear it? Talking to me? What a lovely way to die! Help, zombies!